Blake Lewis joins us now, covering the Skins, OTAs, USA Redskins Wire. We'll get into a little NBA with him. How's the weather down there, my friend?
It's a little wet, but we're indoors here. Practice literally just ended. I'm glad you did your promo reads because this horn just went off and it probably would have scared your audience. So, but we're inside. Practice just ended. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, it should scare some Giant fans reading that Beckham chooses to hang out with Johnny Manziel over practice, but we'll get to that in a moment. So Gruden was very complimentary about a couple of some of these Washington Redskins and these young players. You know, we mentioned Chris Thompson a couple of years ago. He believes he's going to be not only a key cog in this offense, but also a very good third down back, perhaps one of the best third down backs in the NFL. So how about his role as this offense? Will it grow going into this season?
Yeah, I actually just talked with Chris about that over the weekend. And, he's a guy, obviously, there's no secret here in this market that, he and I have a really good relationship. And, he's a guy that I pull for. He's a class kid. But he's a hard worker. And every time you've seen him over the last 3 years, you saw him do things that you just felt like if he was given more of an opportunity, he could be a feature type of back. And I think this year, everyone talks about Samaje Perine, who was drafted in the 4th round out of Oklahoma, and obviously Robert Kelly, who was the starter, won the starting job last year out of Tulane. But I think Chris Thompson has a chance to really, put pressure on these guys. In other words, I think he's not just a third down back. He is one of the best in the league at doing that. But he's a guy that when you go back to games last year, when he had his touches, he had big plays. I mean, he broke 4 touchdown runs off when late in games where he was starting to get the workload. So I think he has a chance to do something.
Yeah, I remember that early game against the Giants. He caught a couple big passes out of the backfield, too, to maintain some drives as well. Anything to read in with their first-round pick, Jonathan Allen, working with the number 3 line on 11-on-11 work? I mean, I would assume not much to read into regarding that.
Nah, I mean, it's one of those things. You see, even though he's a first-round draft pick, he's still a rookie. And, sometimes, coaches, it's a little small, subtle signal. They want you to earn your keep before it's given to you. Everyone knows that guy's going to be a starter on opening day. And if he's not a starter, he'll be one of the first 2 guys in that defensive line rotation. But I wouldn't look into it right now. I mean, he's done some good things, in these OTAs. Today, though, with obviously the full group here, it's going to be an adjustment because you're not battling against rookies anymore.
When you look at the offense, and I guess it's hard to gauge, a day or two in with Kirk Cousins in the offense and not having guys like Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson there. Just first, I guess your initial thoughts on a player like Terrell Pryor.
Well, he had a couple plays today. A couple times Kirk Cousins didn't throw him the ball, but you could see he was blowing the top off the defense. And no, he's not Deshaun. I mean, Deshaun is obviously a unique guy, probably the best, at that as far as taking the top off the defense. But Terrell Pryor is also a 4'3", 40 guy, and he's a lot taller, a lot bigger. There were a couple plays today, though, that I would have liked to have seen Kirk Cousins kind of throw the ball up for Terrell Pryor, and I think, that's going to be an adjustment for Cousins because he's so used to basically having to lay the ball on Deshaun, where Deshaun wasn't a guy that was going to go up and battle anybody for a ball. It was more or less he caught the ball in stride with that great speed. But I think with Pryor, who has speed and has size, he can just lay it up and let him go out and make a play.
I know it's so early on, and I don't want to start handicapping divisions, but when you look at the NFC East, I still think it's going to be extremely competitive. I just think every team, like every year, they have some question marks. I think Dallas takes a step back. The Giants' offensive line is still somewhat of a question mark. The Eagles are going in with a second-year head coach and a second-year quarterback in Wentz and Doug Peterson, respectively. And then there's that enigma of the NFC East. I give you the Washington Redskins, who all they had to do was beat the Giants last year to get into the playoffs, and Cousins didn't have the best game. It seems as though there's always going to be pressure on the quarterback, and in D.C. it's a little more magnified with Kirk Cousins. I get the sense, though, they still do not have the fullest confidence in Kirk Cousins going forward. I mean, do you believe they are fully invested and fully vested going forward in Kirk Cousins?
They do. And first, I do want to apologize. A couple of times you may have heard stuff. A couple of guys have been coming over to me. I've had to wave them off.
Let them know that you're doing a live spot. I don't care if it's Chris. I don't care who it is. Tell them.
Chris came over, Dustin Hopkins. So, but no, I just wrote an article yesterday that, there's a big Vegas odds maker that basically said the Redskins had the lowest odds of winning the NFC East division. And I think a lot of people forget just 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago, they won the division. And I understand that year was kind of a down year in the NFC East. A lot of teams were banged up and hurt, and there was a lot of turmoil, amongst the other teams. But as you said, Q, last year they missed the playoffs by one game, and I can go to 3 or 4 other games that came down to the wire. I mean, over in Europe, we were in Europe. They missed a chip shot, to win that game against Cincinnati in overtime. They lost on a final second play against the Lions in Detroit, and they battled Dallas tough both games they played them. So I think that this is a football team that is clearly under the radar, and I think people. I'm not going to say that you can replace obviously a Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, because that would be disrespectful to those two players, great football players. But I'm telling you right now, they have a first-round draft pick at wide receiver who today looked really impressive in Josh Doxson. I mean, he looked really impressive. He looked like a first-round talent. If he comes out and plays the way he's capable of playing and he looks like he's 100% healthy, the offense goes through Jamison Crowder and Jordan Reed anyway. They're here. So I don't see this being such a fall-off like some people seem to think that will happen. And the other key component to this, too, is that Jay Gruden's calling the plays this year. That's something that players have told me for 2 years. As much as they love Sean McVay, they wanted Jay to call the plays because they just thought that he had a better grasp of all the things they could accomplish and do. With him calling the plays this year, I think the offense is going to go up. Just a quick note, 2 games last year he called the plays. Green Bay, they hung 45 on them. And against the Minnesota Vikings without Deshaun Jackson, by the way, who didn't play in that game, and they still hung, almost 30 on a Minnesota defense that came in ranked 3rd in the league. So just giving you some tidbits.
All right, I only got you for a couple minutes. I want to switch gears, and again, we're coming at you live from Marcachi Meats in Vineland, 1159 North Delsea Drive, Vineland, New Jersey. Check them out online, marcachimeats.com. Extended hours, new deli, new produce. Their grand opening, it's been a great crowd this evening. Everyone's been extremely accommodating. A lot of people won a bunch of prizes and gifts right here in 97.3 ESPN. The girls are doing a great job, promotional staff. Before I let you get out of here, NBA quickly, a couple fronts. Look, I know you can't unring the bell. The Wizards, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get your thoughts on other things. The Wizards, in my estimation, would have gave Cleveland a much better series, albeit Boston was able to get that win. They had an opportunity last night. They couldn't close it out. That's my first thought on that. The other thing is, when you look at Boston, do you think you're going to trade the number 1 pick?
If I'm Boston, it's two facets to that, Q. One is, do you really realize that you're far away from Cleveland as far as really closing the gap by taking a number 1 pick? I mean, and now it's becoming tricky because they're proving to themselves without their best player that maybe they really weren't as bad as they looked in those first 2 games. I mean, so maybe they do hold on to the pick and take, Markel Fultz or someone like that.
I was actually thinking that last night. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was thinking, wow, they're kind of hanging tough without Isaiah Thomas. I mean, is that an indictment on Thomas?
And I think what they're seeing is that he is what he is. He's a great scorer, but he's just a horrible liability on defense, and Cleveland exploited that. So now you're seeing more of Marcus Smart and Bradley, who are defenders and they're physical. So now you get in another offensive weapon. Perhaps now maybe you keep that pick and pick up a big guard and Fultz. Or you trade that pick. You trade that pick and, maybe you call in Indiana or something and see would they be interested in getting rid of Paul George, for that number 1 pick. That to me would be more logical. But if you're Boston, when you take that number 1 pick and you use it and draft a player, then you're basically looking for the future. And let's face it, Cleveland's window is about another 3 years. So
I agree. I think that's fair. Yep.
Yeah, you draft a kid, and it's going to take a year or 2 for him to really to become that guy. By then, Cleveland could be at that point on the way down, because you just said a team like the Wizards could be another team that presses, and maybe Milwaukee next year gives Cleveland some run as well.
Last one for me, and I'm just curious. We were talking about Kevin Durant's comments the other day. Listen, to be fair, look, you can't always have games that are always competitive and close and come. This is not March Madness. You can't get buzzer beaters all over the place. It's right. The NBA. You're going to get some blowouts. We've seen marquee players in Leonard and Thomas and Parker all go down. So I understand what he's saying. I think he's kind of biting the hand that feeds him. Here's my problem with Durant. You have won nothing in your career. And now you're with Golden State. And I'm saying this right now. If they don't win the finals and he struggles, it's open season on Kevin Durant. I just think, you know, he took the easy way out when he signed with Golden State. If you can't beat him, you might as well join him. But what were your thoughts on his comments at first, and how much pressure do you think is on Durant to have a good finals?
Well, I agree with you. I think he's opening up a can of worms. He's so comfortable and safe, feeling like he can talk tough now, you know, because he's got, you know, 4 or 5 other superheroes with him to back him up. The problem is that if they don't win, and listen, you know, I'm not a big Cleveland guy, but I respect what they do, and they're physical. And what San Antonio for a half showed the world was if you can be physical with Golden State, you can beat them. And Cleveland does that better than anybody, and they've got their own superheroes. So with that said, I think that there's even another storyline that'll develop. If Golden State loses this finals, there's a chance that I could see a guy like Klay Thompson leaving. I mean, because let's face it, he's kind of the odd man out as far as his touches. And everyone keeps talking about how great of defense he plays, which he does. But let's face it, he wants to score too. But the offense does not center around him at all. He's almost a third or fourth option at times on the floor. So Golden State could either win this thing and be looking, you know, like one of the great dynasties of our time and, you know, looking forward to defending next year, or they could lose, and then you could go back and say, well, you lost last year with the MVP, and you lost this year when you brought in perhaps the second or third best player in the game to add to that MVP. So they've got a lot of pressure. I think they have more pressure on them than Cleveland does.
I agree because, again, now let's not forget up 3-1 last year, right? And then LeBron and Kyrie do their thing, and Kevin Love finally does his thing. You know, go back to your Thompson point. He does need to get involved in the offense. And you look at, if you just on glance look at the box score and his stat line, you're saying, wow, he's not having the type of playoffs that we're accustomed to. Whereas Kevin Durant, 28, 34, 36, 28, getting all those touches. That's interesting. I don't think Durant opts out. There's just the way that money's on the table with the $26 million. I don't see that. If he opts out, you know, a couple guys were texting in yesterday with a joke saying he's going to opt out if they leave and go to Cleveland. I mean, you know, the bottom line is, go ahead.
I was just going to say I've always wondered this over the last, you know, 2 months of the NBA season, when we just saw, like here in DC, you saw the true final emergence of John Wall. I just wonder, and you see Bradley Beal starting to come into his own at 23, you know, so I've always wondered if you gave Durant a truth serum to ask him, would he reconsider the Wizards, his hometown team that he wouldn't even visit? That's just bad, you know.
Yeah, you're right. And I also think he doesn't want pieces. Yeah, and he doesn't want the spotlight on him. He doesn't. He understands you got 2 or 3. He's got a couple. He's got a couple of Robins to his Batman. So
I agree. I agree. Yeah, he's playing in the Justice League out there. He is. So
that's, oh my God. You know, that's like the third reference to the Justice League in 2 days with you guys.
It is, man. It's more the Legion of Doom then.
All right, I'm up against it, my friend. We'll talk next week. Enjoy OTAs and have a good Memorial Day. Appreciate a couple moments.
All right, take care, my friend. I appreciate it.